something to offer, the show that goes to the heart of people living their dreams. And we'll meet them in just a moment. Hi, I'm so glad to be here today. My guest today is a man that I've known for many, many years, and also it's one of the kind of shows that I get sometimes excited about when I'm traveling. I get to take interviews with my phone, my little LG phone, and no plug for them exactly, but anyway. I was in California in April. I'm just going to say that because this show will probably air much later than that. And my dear friend Dave Chajlow, who's known as Dave Dude, is a cigar aficionado. And for many, many years, he's had a real love of cigars, but the history of cigars and details about them. And he has a wonderful YouTube channel. He does amazing informatives on history, and he travels all over the world to get these vintage cigars. And he's also, he's also a member of Patreon. Yael, my producer, is as well, and I've just become one. And that is a platform for creators, artists, creators, video makers, to share their work, but also have people support them so they can continue. Because, some of the production process, it becomes when you have a love for something, a passion, and something you want to share with people, you give it out. But it also is very helpful if people can just kindly support a little bit, because it helps you be able to do more of it, because many of us do other jobs and try to do what we do as well, and it just helps balance everything out. So it's a wonderful platform, so you should check it out for like his show or my show or Yael's show, Manifest for TV. But anyway, I got to see him in Los Angeles. And I said, I know you do this show. Could I interview you? And he's like, sure. And he told me about that he had just joined Patreon, and I had been told about it years ago. So it was great. So Dave Chajlow has done many things in his life. He's, as a writer. He's like Yael. He's a very IT technical guy. He's worked in that field. He also does some things in customer service and in the past. And he loves cigars. He is an expert, and he just gets a great joy from sharing the history of them. And there's amazing history. So we're going to, we're just going to go right to the interview. I was going to say, should we take an offering and then the interview? But we're going to go right to the interview. And right, Yael, or are we going to take an offering first?
Yes,
okay, we're going straight to the interview. And I hope you'll enjoy it, and then we'll come back. And then you'll get to see one of his, something from his site, and Yael may show some pictures of his site too, his different sites. All right, enjoy. So I'm in LA, actually I'm in Brentwood right now with a dear friend who's known as Dave, the Cuban cigar guy.
Yeah.
And I've known Dave for years. And Dave, I know you've always enjoyed a good cigar, but when did you become sort of have your mission to inform people about the joys of great cigars and smoking them and how to preserve them and have them nice for when you want to use them?
Yeah.
And tell us about your YouTube channel as well.
Yeah, so I've been smoking cigars for, decades. Let's just go with that. And probably about, 10 to 12 years ago, I'd been smoking cigars, but then I started getting more into vintage stuff, and I read this book called The Illustrated Encyclopedia of Post-Revolution Havana Cigars. That's a mouthful. And so the author of that book, he created this book, a 500-page book with a lot of information in it. So I started going through that book and reading it about vintage cigars and tasting notes and all that kind of stuff, and it really piqued my interest. And so now, I did the channel and all that kind of stuff. So go ahead.
Yeah. What does your channel consist of? You talk about certain cigars from different parts of, people always know about Cuban cigars, but there's cigars from many different South American countries and countries all over the world. And
what are like, is there a flavor difference, smoke, how fast they burn kind of thing? Do they change up that kind of way? Is there like a essence of?
Well, I mean, different tobaccos have different types of flavors and profiles and so on and so forth. So you have Cuban tobacco, which is kind of like the king of the tobacco strains or whatever it is, because of the way that the soil is, the microclimates there and all that kind of stuff. It's kind of like they have a monopoly on this great tasting tobacco. So what happened is when Castro took over, there was a lot of people that left Cuba and took Cuban seed with them to like Nicaragua, Honduras, Costa Rica, Ecuador, all through there. I mean, there's a lot of places where people took Cuban seed and they grow it. So, but the thing is that a lot of those places, the tobacco, it just doesn't have the same type of flavor as a Cuban tobacco.
Because it's not grown in the same dirt and the soil and the mineral base kind of thing?
Yeah, and there's a lot of speculation as to why that is, but they say that like Cuba has various microclimates that are just different. The soil's different. Like a lot of the soil, like Nicaragua, though, is a real hotbed for tobacco. We were talking about Mexico today. Mexico grows tobacco.
We talked about like Canada and like what's the difference in things like from the U.S. or Canada? I mean, it's all different kind of.
Yeah, there's all kinds of different types of tobacco that are growing all over the place. Now, Canadian tobacco, I'm not too sure on, but in Connecticut, they have Connecticut shade grown wrapper. So that's wrapper leaf that they grow in Connecticut to wrap around the outside of the cigar, because a hand-rolled cigar has the filler that they put in there. Then they take a binder leaf and they roll that around there, put everything together, and then finally they put a wrapper leaf around that to where it looks pretty. So, and then there's a lot of speculation on that too, where like some people say, oh, wrapper leaf on the outside of the cigar contributes a lot to the flavor of the cigar. There's other people that say it doesn't really, not so much. So, but it makes the cigar look good. So, anyway.
And so do you feature like your YouTube channel? Do you feature a different cigar or a different type of cigar every episode? And,
yes.
And do you have like a weekly episode, or how does it work with you?
Yeah, so I release one video a week, usually Thursday morning at 6 in the morning California time.
So you did one today, probably.
Yeah, I just one today was the La Excepcion Grand Ganar. It's a big diadema-sized cigar about this big that was from the 1970s. So the cigar at the time of filming was like around 40 plus years old. I think 40? Yeah, 70, 40. Yeah, because it's 2019. So 40 plus years old. Just go from there. And so once a week I release a video, and it's all kinds of different stuff. I'll do new cigars, I'll do old vintage cigars, I'll do non-Cuban cigars. It just depends on what's going on, but I don't think I've repeated myself at all on anything.
Now, can I ask about, so if you're a cigar smoker like you are or somebody else, and you enjoy cigars and history of them, if you buy a vintage one, do you smoke them, or do you just like keep them?
I do. Okay, so and that's the reason I started this channel too, is because there's a lot of collectors out there that will collect cigars like baseball cards or cars or whatever. I mean, they collect cigars. And so these people that collect these cigars, they don't smoke them. Well, not all of them, but there's a good majority that just have them in their collection and they don't smoke those cigars. So for me, I'm a smoker, so I try and find and procure vintage cigars and smoke them on camera, because these cigars are getting harder and harder to find, and so I'm trying to document as many of these as I can so that people in the future can have a point of reference as to maybe what the tasting notes are. Or
I was going to say, do you tell people like, oh, it's a little smoky, well, that sounds weird, smoky,
Yeah.
like a sweet flavor, or it's got a little
Yes.
punch to it? And do you think, being like the 40-year-old cigar you did today, do you think it's lost some of its, oomph, or do you think because people keep them a certain way that they're pretty much
So
authentic to the time, like if you were smoking them back then in Cuba or something?
Well, no. See, the thing is cigars are like wine. So they ferment and age accordingly. So if you take a cigar today that was rolled today, and you fast forward 30 years and you keep it in a very good environment, that cigar is going to change. The flavor of that cigar is going to change over 30 years. So usually what happens is cigars have a lot of tannins and congeners. I don't really want to get into like all of the
it gets too
scientific, but there's a bunch of stuff inside the cigar that as the cigar ages, that stuff wicks out of there and it turns into other things that are more desirable for cigar smokers to experience in a cigar.
Taste.
Kind of like wine.
Yeah, in sensorially, we're saying.
Yes, yes. So like it's the same thing as wine, right? So you get a bottle of red wine or whatever it is, and it comes out in 2016, and then you put it in the bottle and then you age it, and then 30 years from now you drink it, it's going to taste different than it did when it was first made, right? So cigars are the same way.
Right. So you mentioned like how it's like wine, and I think I asked you once because we know each other, and I just had a curious question. I've met some people that are cigar smokers, and they tend to, not all of them, but I asked you, is there any kind of relationship to people who maybe like a bourbon and a cigar or a hard liquor, and are they the cigar smokers? I mean, we're not going to make a generalization, but sometimes a person who likes a good vintage something wants a good vintage cigar. Do you find that to be kind of the rule of thumb with that, or just kind of random?
I think cigars kind of relate to a lifestyle, I think, too, as well. And part of that lifestyle is various types of adult beverages, let's just say that go along with a good cigar. So, people do a lot of different combinations and pairings with cigars and so on and so forth. I think, though, the one thing, though, is that with the cigar, what happens is it makes your mouth very alkaline. So the pH in your mouth is, I don't know what the neutral pH is. It's like, 7 point something or whatever it is. So as you smoke a cigar, it raises the pH, I think. I think higher is more alkaline and lower is acidic.
Yeah, so, I think that's correct.
So as you smoke a cigar on your palate, the pH goes this way, higher. So you want something to kind of bring it back to a more neutral pH so that you're enjoying the cigar. So things like champagne or a Coke, actually, something that's acidic will help with your enjoyment of the cigar.
Oh, cool.
In that aspect of it. Now, if you're out with your friends enjoying stuff or whatever it is, you might want to do a bourbon or a scotch or whatever it is with your cigar, and you're not caring about a pH on your palate or whatever it is.
You're just kind of having a nice time.
Yeah, and that's all part of the lifestyle too, because cigars. That's one thing about cigars. I was in Geneva one time, and I was at the Beau Rivage, and it's this tiny little patio at the hotel, and there's like a couple of couches and a couple of chairs there, and I was with people that were like in oil industry. One guy was in film, then you had me, and another person was in real estate or whatever, and that's what the cigars do. Is they kind of that lifestyle kind of brings everybody
mutually
together.
bond, like to get the global citizen-y kind of thing going on, or mutual bonding of all different kind of people.
It's kind of
I was going to ask you, what's the cigar bar experience like? Because they have them in New York. I know they have them out here in L.A. And that must be where you meet a lot of interesting people too.
You can, at a lounge, and you can meet people in lounges and all of that stuff, and it's kind of an interesting thing. There's an interesting dynamic that goes on with the lounge because you have your regular people that are there, and then you have people that are coming in and not so regular, and sometimes it can be a little cliquey, sometimes not. It just depends on where you're at, and I guess the people that are there, and so on and so forth. But it's a good place to kind of go and hang out, and it's kind of like, I don't know.
Now there's clubs too, right? There's there's lounges that anybody can go, but aren't there like members only kind of cigar things?
Oh yeah.
And that's the aficionados seem to join up that kind of thing, or?
Yeah, that kind of stuff. I mean, the Grand Havana Room here in LA, that's kind of a big thing. It's right on, I think it's on Cannon in Beverly Hills. There are certain private clubs, like I think Club Macanudo. There's other private clubs that people pay for a membership so that you're more sequestered and you're kind of like I don't know, you're not.
Maybe they weed out a certain type of people,
Maybe,
I
yeah.
don't know. They
But-
may profile a little bit, who knows? But
Who
yeah.
knows about that? But
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not a private lounge kind of a guy. I couldn't afford to do it anyway. And even if I could, I don't know if that would be something that I would do, because I just really enjoyed smoking cigars with my friends and kind of hanging out at the house and in the garage and stuff like that. So anyway, that's kind of what I do.
And so, what would be? I'm gonna let you go in a second. Like you have the channel, so your mission there is to sort of, like you said, document and give the historical and the current. Yeah, so that's great.
Yeah. So Dave Dude is, if you go into Google.
Yeah, what's
or
your YouTube channel thing?
It's Dave Dude.
Dave Dude.
Dave Dude. So, or Dave the Cuban Cigar Dude.
Dave, okay, great.
And then the website is dudecigars.com. If you type that in there, then it'll get you to the website where I pipe in the YouTube videos onto my webpage, along with some other stuff in there.
So they can learn a lot about cigars. You're like a historian, a cigar, current affairs and historical affairs.
Yeah, it's kind of like a catch-all for all this kind of stuff. So and
there's not too many of you, I don't think, that are doing what you're doing yet.
Yeah, and I try to be as quick and to the point as I possibly can. My videos I try and keep them short. Sometimes I just can't keep it short because, like the Grand Ginar one, that cigar came in a wooden coffin, they call it, and then it's wrapped with foil, and then there's a paper in there, and then you have the cigar. So
it's a beautiful unveiling you did during the show. It must
yes.
be but could be highly dramatic a little bit.
It was, but it took a considerable period of time to do all that kind of stuff. So sometimes videos are longer, like maybe 11, 12, 13 minutes, depending on the video. But I usually try to keep the videos between 5 and 8 minutes long, so that people aren't just getting bored.
Okay, really cool. Well, Dave, thank you for letting me do this, and I'll put on the show, and maybe if it's okay with you, I'll put in a YouTube video or two of yours along with it, and they'll get a whole feel of everything you do as Dave the Cuban Cigar Dude. Okay.
Yeah.
I don't even think I said that right.
You said it perfect.
Okay, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
There's so many things in the world that people, have a feel for, a passion for. That's why, the show's called Something to Offer. Who would know? I mean, wouldn't know all those things about cigars, even though when I was a little kid, my dad smoked a cigar, but once in a while, but it was a very basic cigar. He didn't smoke cigarettes. And I'm not, condoning smoking or non-smoking, but this is a kind of historical kind of thing that's cultural and historical throughout the ages, and kind of fascinating to me. And you can tell he really loves it. And I don't know if you noticed this T-shirt, it said Pink Floyd, but that was a cigar band, and it was on a certain cigar was made with a Pink Floyd cigar. So it had the Pink Floyd. So I think we'll take a moment for an offering, then I guess come back for a minute, Yael, or go right to his thing. I don't know what you're thinking.
Offering.
No, the offering, but then after that, are we coming back for a minute? Or
We'll go to the video.
Okay, then we're going to go to a video. We have one. I don't think we're we're not sharing the one he mentioned, but another beautiful interview Well, a beautiful time he spends with the cigar and his the way he presents his YouTube channel. And so we'll probably be ending with that. So enjoy it. We're going to have an offering now, and thank you, Dave. And that was my front of my friend's house, another friend in LA. It was beautiful, and you could hear the birds and everything. And I'm just really happy. I know so many people who are into so many different and interesting things, and we can always learn from every one of them. See you later.
So what we have here is a box of Cohiba Lancero. The Lancero is 38 by 192 or 7.6 inches long. The Vitola de Galera listed as a Laguito number 1, and the common name is Long Panatella. This is, like I said, the varnished point nature box of 25 cigars. So these cigars come cello wrapped. They stopped putting a cello around these cigars roughly in the 2000 area, so on and so forth. putting a cello around this cigar. I have done various Cohibas in the past. Another Lancero from roughly 1993 that had the cello on it that people thought was fake, but it wasn't. So right here we can see NNUA, which is November of 1986. The box code on there. Really like that nice Cuba tobacco leaf on there. Here's another view of these cigars, cello wrapped and in the varnished white nature box. So anyway, Cohiba as a brand was launched internationally to the public in roughly 1982 at the Ritz Hotel in Madrid. I believe the Liguita numbers 1, 2, and 3 were released at that party in '82, and the legend has continued on, and it's one of the more expensive cigars on the planet to get right out the gate. But anyway, let's get a little bit closer to this cigar. So here we are, a little bit closer to the cigar. Got it out here. I'm going to give it a quick spin with the cello around it, and then attempt to pull this cello off. Once we've gone through this part here, where I like to do it. But like I've always said, I'd like to do everything and kind of show all angles of the cigar and so on and so forth for posterity reasons and documentation purposes, because you never know how long these older cigars are going to be around in circulation. Okay, so here we are back with the cigar, giving it a quick twirl on there with the cello on it. I'm going to attempt to take the cello off here. The cigar at the time of filming is 32 years old, so
Wow.
It's been in that cello for quite a long time, and sometimes they get real sticky. You have to roll it along a flat surface, which is what I'm going to be doing here. I'll be rolling it along a flat surface to try and loosen it up. And because these cigars, that's one misnomer of these cigars, is that they're plugged or whatever. And the bottom line is that these cigars have a lot of moisture inside, and the tobaccos are quite oily. So if you don't let the cigar rest and sit in a humidor for a considerable period of time, you're going to smoke the cigar and you're going to think it's plugged. But really, for the most part, it's just because there's so much oil and so much moisture inside the cigar that the smoke can't go through that. It's just too moist and too oily, and so you think that the cigar's plugged, but it's not. And when these cigars are smoking great, when these cigars, I mean, it's a really pleasurable cigar to smoke. And there is a reason why these cigars are very popular with connoisseurs, is that this size and this shape of cigar definitely is conducive for a very pleasurable smoking experience. So, and I know that a lot of people today, they don't prefer a cigar like this. They prefer a thicker, wider ring gauge cigar, but I'm telling you, this cigar, when it's on, it's really on. And whoops, oh shoot. Well, I figured I'd show this to you guys because I'm a knucklehead. Anyway, let's give this cigar a quick twirl. So as you can see, I got the band back on there, and everything is going to be okay. I'm going to get this thing under the water. I just flicked up messed up the wrapper a little bit at the top, but it's not going to detract from the overall smoking experience on the cigar. Trust me, it's not. Just stuff happens, and you got to be careful, and I just need to be more careful with these cigars. So let's get it underneath the water.
Oh, wow. Water body, Yael.
Okay, so we're back here with the Cohiba Lancero from 1986. So I did have, this one is not damaged. I cut open the cello as opposed to trying to pull it off there. So let that be a lesson to you. You got anything with an old yellow cello on there, don't try and do that. Just cut it off. Works out much better that way. Yeah, cigar's perfect. So anyway, all that other stuff out of the way. Dudecigars.com for aggregating all of this stuff on Instagram and so on and so forth, and then Facebook is Smoking Vintage Cigars. So please go over to Smoking Vintage Cigars and post your cigar videos, or cigar pictures, whatever, on Smoking Vintage Cigars. So anyway, and that's all good. So anyway, I gotta stop saying so anyway. So let's give this thing a cut and a light. Excellent draw. So like I was saying before too, is that a lot of times you get these cigars and there's a lot of Ligero in there and it's a small ring gauge and you think it's plugged, but you just need to age the cigar for a while so that it wicks out those oils and so on and so forth that are in there so that the cigar starts to draw. So once you get past like 3 to 5 years, the cigar will start to open up and it'll become a much better smoking experience. Because I know I've smoked quite a few of these young, really young, probably with less than 5 years of age on them, and they just don't smoke that well. So take it for what it's worth from some knucklehead on the internet, but that's been my experience. I don't know what your experience has been, but anyway, I'm rambling on. Let's light this thing. Yeah, so right out the gate, there's kind of like a rich tobacco in there with the grassiness in there on this thing, but it's fairly heavy actually on the palate. The last one I smoked, it seemed to be a bit lighter, but what I did was I pulled the cello off and then I put it in at 72% humidity with the cello off, and the smoking experience was kind of it wasn't all that good. So this time what I did is I left it in the cello at 72% humidity. So anyway, I'm going to smoke this thing down to the band, and I'll be back with the taste. Talking about the tasting notes on the Cohiba Lancero. So like I said, the cigar opened up with kind of a grassiness in there along with that tobacco. And as it developed in the first third, the grassiness gave way to kind of a sweet hay along with that tobacco and the retro and a slight hint of a beaniness. The finish on the palate was quite strong. It was thick, oily, and chewy on the palate. I was kind of smacking my lips with that finish on the palate because it was had really heavy finish on the palate. As the cigar burned down through the first third into the second third, that sweet hay gave way more to a honey sweetness in the retro, along with an herbiness that came up in the retro as well. The beaniness tamped back quite a bit to almost not even being there, and that tobacco really tamped back quite a bit too as well. The finish on the palate, it kind of transitioned from that really thick, oily finish on the palate to more of a brighter, cleaner finish on the palate. As the cigar burned down through the second third into the last third, it was kind of interesting how there was a tug-of-war between the herbiness in the retro and the honey sweetness in the retro as well. They kind of went back and forth between each other in the retro. The beaniness actually came up a little bit. It was kind of like it alternated between that herbiness, the beaniness, and that honey sweetness in the retro. Was quite nice. The finish on the palate was still fairly bright and clean, but the herbiness on the palate actually got a little bit more dense and a little bit stronger.